When most people think about themselves, they imagine a collection of memories, choices, and experiences that they can easily recognize. Yet, as IRVIN Yalom often reminds us, the truth of who we are is far more complex, and much of our inner life remains concealed, even from ourselves. In his book, Love's Executioner, Yalom describes how patients often construct elaborate facades, presenting themselves in therapy not as they truly are, but as they wish to be seen. He notes, "We are forever trapped between the face we show the world and the truth we dare not admit to ourselves. This tension, this fracture between the presented self and the hidden self, is where the work of unmasking begins." Sigmund Freud, long before Yalom, introduced the notion of the unconscious mind, those forbidden desires, painful memories, and unresolved conflicts that remain buried, yet influence us constantly. Carl Jung took this further with his concept of the shadow, the dark and often disowned part of our psyche. What we refuse to acknowledge does not disappear. Instead, it festers beneath the surface, subtly shaping our relationships, our fears, and even the way we interpret the world around us. To achieve a full mind, we cannot remain blind to this hidden dimension. We must dare to turn inward and look where we least want to. But why is it so difficult to face the hidden self? Yalom often illustrates that avoidance is not simply a choice, it is a defense. People hide from themselves because the truth feels unbearable. In existential psychotherapy, he emphasizes the four ultimate concerns: death, freedom, isolation, and meaninglessness. Each of these awakens profound anxiety, and rather than face them head-on, we bury them beneath distractions, ambitions, or the carefully curated images we present on the outside. Yet these defenses come at a cost. The more we suppress, the more fragmented we become. We walk through life feeling divided, restless, never fully at ease, because we are estranged from our own depths. Imagine a person who prides themselves on being endlessly selfless, always giving, always sacrificing. On the surface, this appears noble, but within, in the shadow, may dwell resentment, envy, or a desperate hunger to be seen and valued. The hidden self longs to emerge, but the conscious mind rejects it as selfish or unacceptable, so it remains buried. Over time, this suppression leaks out in passive aggression, burnout, or a vague sense of dissatisfaction with life. Yalom would argue that the path to wholeness requires not denying these hidden impulses, but bringing them into the light, naming them, and integrating them into the story of who we are. There is a paradox here. The very parts of ourselves we fear the most often hold the key to our freedom. Jung wrote that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Yalom echoes this in his therapeutic encounters, showing that when patients finally confront the truths they have long denied, whether it is anger at a parent, fear of abandonment, or guilt over past choices, they begin to feel less fragmented. The mask cracks, and beneath it something more authentic emerges. To achieve a full mind is not to polish the mask until it shines, but to recognize that the mask itself is only a fragment, never the whole. Facing the hidden self is not a one-time revelation. It is a lifelong process. Each stage of life uncovers new shadows. As Yalom writes, the more you know yourself, the more you can shape your own destiny. But self-knowledge requires courage, because what lies beneath may not be flattering. Still, the reward is immense. By acknowledging the repressed, by allowing ourselves to see what we once refused, we reclaim energy that was wasted in suppression. That energy can then be redirected toward living more fully, more honestly, and with deeper connection to others. One striking aspect of Yalom's work is how he blends existential thought with the raw honesty of the therapeutic encounter. He never treats patients as puzzles to be solved, but as fellow travelers confronting the human condition. In revealing their hidden selves, patients discover that they are not alone. Their shame, their fears, their suppressed desires. These are not aberrations, but shared elements of what it means to be human. This recognition softens the harshness of self-judgment and opens the door to compassion, both for oneself and for others. The full mind, then, is not a perfected self-image, but an integrated one, a mind that can hold contradictions, that can accept light and darkness, and that no longer needs to hide. To unmask the hidden self is to step into uncertainty, but it is also to step into truth. And as Yalom has shown time and again, truth, even when painful, is ultimately liberating. It is the first essential step on the journey toward achieving a full mind. If unmasking the hidden self is the first step toward a full mind, then cultivating awareness is the foundation that allows that discovery to unfold. Without awareness, the shadow remains in darkness. The unconscious continues to dictate behavior, and the individual drifts through life without truly living it. Yet awareness is not a loud or dramatic force. It is subtle, patient, and often overlooked. IRVIN Yalom has often emphasized that awareness is not simply noticing what is happening, but entering into a deeper state of presence where the truths of existence can no longer be ignored. In existential psychotherapy, Yalom observes that much of human suffering stems from what he calls existential avoidance, our refusal to confront realities such as mortality, isolation, and freedom. Awareness is the antidote. To become aware is to stop running, even for a moment, and allow the weight of being human to settle into consciousness. This is not easy. It is uncomfortable, sometimes terrifying, but without awareness, no growth can occur. As Carl Rogers, another great voice in psychotherapy, once wrote, "The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change." That acceptance begins with awareness, seeing clearly, without denial, without distortion. Awareness, however, is not the same as self-criticism. Many people confuse the two, believing that to become aware is to scrutinize every flaw or mistake. But awareness is not judgment, it is observation. It is the ability to stand back and see one's inner world as it is, not as one wishes it to be. Yalom frequently described how patients, when encouraged to observe their own feelings in real time, often discovered that their anxiety was not rooted in external circumstances, but in deeper existential concerns. For example, a patient obsessed with career failure might, through awareness, realize that the fear is less about losing a job and more about confronting mortality. The haunting awareness that time is finite and opportunities lost may never return. Such awareness transforms the problem from a shallow complaint into a profound recognition of the human condition. Mindfulness practices, though often associated with Eastern traditions, align deeply with these existential insights. To sit in silence, to breathe, to notice thoughts as they arise without clinging to them. This is awareness in practice. Contemporary psychology has adopted mindfulness not as a religious ritual, but as a therapeutic tool, precisely because it nurtures the kind of clear-eyed presence that Yalom and others see as essential for growth. When the mind is scattered, racing from one distraction to the next, the hidden self remains hidden. But when awareness slows the rush of thought, the deeper truths begin to surface. Consider how awareness changes relationships. Many conflicts between partners, friends, or family members are not about what they appear to be. A small argument about chores may conceal deeper feelings of neglect or fear of abandonment. Without awareness, these underlying emotions remain invisible, and the conflict repeats endlessly. But when one becomes aware, when one pauses and asks, "What am I truly feeling right now?" the cycle begins to shift. Yalom described therapy as a space where awareness could flourish, where patients could examine the real emotions beneath their surface stories. In this sense, awareness is not passive, it is transformative. It interrupts automatic reactions and opens the door to authenticity. There is also the awareness of time, which Yalom explored extensively. In Staring at the Sun, he wrote that, "Though the physicality of death destroys us, the idea of death may save us." What he meant is that the awareness of mortality, rather than being paralyzing, can awaken us to life. When we become aware that time is limited, every moment sharpens in meaning. Procrastination, pettiness, and avoidance lose their grip when we see life as a finite gift. Thus, awareness of death paradoxically deepens our awareness of life. It is silent, yes, but it reshapes everything. Another dimension of awareness lies in the body. Too often, modern life severs the mind from the body as though they were separate entities. But awareness of the body, its tensions, its rhythms, its signals, grounds us in the present. Psychoanalyst Wilhelm Reich argued that repressed emotions often lodge themselves in muscular patterns, what he called character armor. To bring awareness to the body is to notice these armors and soften them, allowing repressed feelings to rise into consciousness. A clenched jaw may hold back unspoken anger, a tight chest may conceal grief. When awareness illuminates these bodily truths, healing begins. Yet awareness is not a final destination. It is a practice. It must be cultivated daily, in small ways. Sitting with silence rather than filling it with noise, observing emotions rather than immediately reacting, noticing the passing of time rather than numbing it with endless distraction. The full mind cannot exist without awareness, because awareness is the space in which all other insights are born. It is the soil from which meaning, connection, and integration can grow. Yalom often spoke of therapy not as giving answers, but as expanding awareness. He would ask questions that turned the patient's gaze inward, forcing them to notice what they had long ignored. The power of awareness, then, is not in solving every problem, but in illuminating the terrain of the mind so that one is no longer walking blind. When we become aware, we reclaim the ability to choose. We may still face suffering, but it is no longer suffered unconsciously. It is met with open eyes, with presence, and with a willingness to live fully. Awareness, silent though it may be, is the foundation of freedom. It allows us to unmask the self, to face mortality, to connect authentically with others, and ultimately to move toward wholeness. To achieve a full mind, one must learn to listen not only to the loud voices within, but also to the quiet whispers of awareness, guiding us gently but powerfully toward the truth of who we are. There are moments in life when silence feels heavier than words. A child who grows up in a home where anger is never expressed, a partner who swallows resentment for years, or a grieving soul who never allows themselves to cry. Each carries within them a silent burden. These unspoken emotions do not simply vanish. As IRVIN Yalom reminds us, unexpressed feelings do not die. They are buried alive and come forth later in uglier ways. This haunting truth is at the heart of why so many lives feel constricted, joyless, or inexplicably burdened. The mind cannot be full when its corridors are filled with ghosts of emotions never given voice. Sigmund Freud was among the first to describe how repressed feelings shape behavior. In his theory of repression, emotions too painful or socially unacceptable are pushed out of awareness, only to return disguised as symptoms, anxiety, compulsions, even physical ailments. Carl Jung expanded on this, describing repression as the fuel of the shadow, the part of the psyche that contains everything we deny. Yalom, however, brought a deeply human dimension to these ideas. In his therapeutic work, he often witnessed how patients' suffering was not only the result of trauma, but of their lifelong refusal to acknowledge the emotions those traumas had provoked. In Love's Executioner, he tells of patients who, when finally able to speak their unspoken rage, grief, or longing, experienced a profound lightness, as if laying down a burden they had carried in silence for decades. The weight of unspoken emotions is not abstract. It seeps into the body, the posture, the breath. Psychoanalyst Wilhelm Reich argued that unexpressed feelings become lodged in muscular patterns, creating what he called character armor. A clenched jaw may hold back anger, hunched shoulders may carry grief, restless legs may betray anxiety. These embodied emotions, when unacknowledged, become chronic states of tension. The body remembers what the mind refuses. Yalom observed this as well. Patients who came into therapy complaining of fatigue, headaches, or vague unease often discovered, through the process of expression, that their bodies had been carrying the weight of emotions long suppressed. But why do people remain silent? The reasons are many. Some fear rejection. If I reveal my anger, will I lose love? Others fear collapse. If I allow myself to grieve, will I drown in sorrow? Society, too, plays its role. From childhood, many are taught that certain feelings are unacceptable. Boys should not cry, girls should not be angry, adults should not feel fear. So we learn to silence ourselves, to wear the mask of composure, even as a storm rages within. Over time, this silence becomes second nature, and we begin to forget that the emotions are there at all. Yet they do not disappear, they wait. The tragedy of unspoken emotions is that they create distance not only within the self, but also between people. A couple may live together for decades, yet never truly know each other because both keep silent about their disappointments or fears. Families fracture under the weight of what is never said. Friendships dissolve because vulnerability was withheld. Yalom has often emphasized that authentic connection requires authenticity of feeling. To speak one's truth, even when uncomfortable, is the only way to bridge the chasm of isolation. Silence, though it may preserve peace in the moment, ultimately deepens loneliness. When emotions remain unspoken, they also distort perception. A person who suppresses anger may begin to see hostility everywhere, projecting their own denied feelings onto others. One who refuses to acknowledge grief may find themselves oddly numb, unable to feel joy, as if all emotions have been muted together. The unconscious, in this way, demands expression, even if indirectly. Freud called this the return of the repressed. What is denied in one form reappears in another. Yalom's patients often discovered that their depression or anxiety was not a mysterious chemical imbalance, but the residue of years of unexpressed emotions, finally demanding attention. And yet, the very act of speaking what was unspoken can be transformative. In therapy, Yalom often invited patients to voice the feelings they feared most. Rage at a deceased parent, jealousy of a sibling, disappointment in a partner, emotions often considered shameful or forbidden. When finally spoken, these emotions lost their toxic weight. What had been buried in silence became a source of vitality. Yalom described the process as clearing the inner chamber, a catharsis that made space for authenticity and growth. He noted that to the extent that one can share one's deepest emotions, life becomes richer and less solitary. The lesson is clear. Unspoken emotions are not benign. They corrode from within, shaping behavior, distorting relationships, and dulling the experience of life. To achieve a full mind, one must allow these emotions to surface, not recklessly, but honestly. Speaking does not mean raging uncontrollably or collapsing into despair, but giving voice, naming, acknowledging, and integrating what has long been hidden. As Jung observed, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Yalom's work shows that the simple yet profound act of expression can loosen the grip of fate, allowing individuals to reclaim agency and vitality. Imagine for a moment a world where people spoke more freely of their sorrows and fears, their longings and frustrations. The weight of silence would lift, replaced by a greater sense of shared humanity. we would recognize in each other the same storms we carry ourselves. That recognition is not only healing, it is liberating. For in the end, the full mind is not a silent one, but one that has dared to give voice to all its hidden truths. When people speak of happiness, they often imagine it as the accumulation of pleasures, successes, or comforts. Yet again and again, we discover that even those who achieve everything they once dreamed of are left with a strange emptiness. The career is flourishing, the house is beautiful, the family is stable, and still something feels incomplete. IRVIN Yalom, in existential psychotherapy, explains this paradox by pointing to the human hunger for meaning. Without meaning, all achievements ring hollow. As Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, famously wrote in Man's Search for Meaning, "Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how." Meaning is not an ornament of life. It is its foundation, the missing puzzle piece that makes everything else fit. Yalom often witnessed in therapy that patients came seeking relief from anxiety or depression, but beneath those symptoms lay a deeper crisis, a void where meaning should have been. He argued that human beings are not merely creatures of instinct or survival. We are beings who need purpose, who crave significance beyond the mechanics of existence. When this dimension is absent, life becomes mechanical, repetitive, and strangely weightless. Patients would confess feeling numb or disconnected, even when nothing was outwardly wrong. The problem was not a lack of comfort, but a lack of meaning. The search for meaning is deeply tied to the existential concerns Yalom identified: death, freedom, isolation, and meaninglessness. Each of these forces us to confront the fragility of existence. Death reminds us that our time is finite. Freedom confronts us with the terrifying responsibility of choice. Isolation reveals that no matter how close we are to others, we are ultimately alone in our consciousness. And meaninglessness, the recognition that the universe itself does not hand us purpose, demands that we create meaning for ourselves. Awareness of these concerns can either paralyze us or awaken us. The difference lies in whether we face them with denial or with courage. Frankl's experience in the concentration camps is perhaps the most striking illustration of this truth. Surrounded by suffering and death, he observed that those who survived longest were not necessarily the strongest physically, but those who could find meaning in their suffering, whether it was the hope of reuniting with loved ones, the pursuit of a future task, or even the determination to face pain with dignity, meaning transformed unbearable suffering into something survivable. Yalom echoed this in his therapeutic work, guiding patients to ask not, "Why do I suffer?" but "What can I create from this suffering?" In this reframing, pain itself becomes a doorway to significance. Yet meaning is not something one stumbles upon fully formed. It is not given from outside. It is constructed, shaped through choices, relationships, and values. Here lies both the freedom and the burden. The absence of meaning can lead to despair, but the possibility of creating meaning opens the path to a fuller life. Carl Jung suggested that meaning often arises from the integration of opposites within the self, the reconciliation of shadow and light, conscious and unconscious. Freud, though more skeptical, recognized that human beings need illusions of purpose to endure life. Yalom, standing within this lineage, offers a more grounded view. Meaning is found not in grand cosmic narratives, but in the immediacy of human connection, creativity, and authenticity. Therapy, in Yalom's eyes, is itself an act of meaning-making. The therapeutic encounter, where two human beings meet with honesty and vulnerability, creates a space where patients can reimagine their lives. He describes moments when patients, after exploring their fears of death or isolation, suddenly awaken to the urgency of living. They recognize that meaning does not wait for them in the future, but is available in the present, in the way they love, the way they contribute, the way they confront their own truths. Yalom once wrote, "Though the search for meaning may never cease, one can live fully by engaging in life while searching." In other words, meaning is not a fixed destination, but a way of walking. Consider how different life feels when infused with purpose. A simple conversation with a friend becomes more than passing time. It becomes a chance to connect deeply. A small act of kindness carries weight, not because it changes the whole world, but because it affirms one's role in it. Even suffering, when connected to meaning, becomes bearable. A parent caring for a sick child may endure sleepless nights, not with despair, but with resolve, because the suffering is bound to love. Without meaning, those same nights would feel like a crushing punishment. The difference is not in the circumstances, but in the interpretation. Yet the search for meaning also demands honesty. Many people chase borrowed meanings, status, wealth, admiration, only to find them unfulfilling. Yalom would encourage patients to ask themselves, is this meaning truly mine, or is it an inheritance from culture, family, or expectation? To achieve a full mind, one must discern authentic purpose from imposed scripts. This is not easy. It requires stripping away illusions, facing the anxiety of freedom, and daring to choose meaning consciously. But once chosen, that meaning transforms existence from a series of empty motions into a coherent journey. Meaning is the missing puzzle piece, but not because it completes the picture once and for all. Rather, it is the piece that makes the picture worth continuing. Without it, the colors fade, the shapes blur, and life feels like a puzzle scattered on the floor. With it, even when incomplete, the picture becomes worth gazing at, worth living into. Yalom, Frankl, and generations of psychoanalysts remind us that to be human is to be a meaning seeker. And though meaning may never be final, the act of seeking is itself the essence of a full mind. If there is one truth that psychoanalysis, existential philosophy, and modern psychology all converge upon, it is this: human beings are not designed to live in isolation. From the very first moments of life, survival itself depends on connection. The infant clings to the mother not only for nourishment, but for the reassurance of presence. This primal need never disappears. Yet, as IRVIN Yalom emphasizes in existential psychotherapy, isolation remains one of the four ultimate concerns of human existence. Each of us must confront the reality that no matter how close we come to another person, we are ultimately alone within our own consciousness. This paradox, our deep hunger for connection alongside the inevitability of isolation, defines much of the human struggle. Yalom distinguishes three forms of isolation: interpersonal, intrapersonal, and existential. Interpersonal isolation occurs when one feels cut off from others, whether physically or emotionally. Intrapersonal isolation happens when we are disconnected from parts of ourselves, our feelings, desires, or memories. Existential isolation runs even deeper. It is the inescapable gap between one consciousness and another. The full mind requires that we acknowledge isolation without denying it, using connection not as a cure-all, but as a means of softening its sting. Isolation is not merely a state of being, it actively shapes perception. Individuals who remain emotionally or socially cut off often develop distorted self-concepts and misinterpret the intentions of others. Anxiety, depression, and compulsive behaviors frequently mask deeper relational deficits. Yalom's work demonstrates that many psychiatric symptoms are not random dysfunctions, but cries for human connection. In therapy, he observed that the relational encounter itself, the simple presence of an attentive, empathetic other, can catalyze profound change. The single most powerful force in psychotherapy is the relationship itself, he writes, underscoring that human connection is not an adjunct to treatment but its cornerstone. Other psychoanalysts reinforce this view. Donald Winnicott emphasized the importance of the holding environment. the psychological space created by a caregiver or therapist where the individual feels safe enough to explore inner life. Carl Rogers advanced the concept of unconditional positive regard, where acceptance and empathy create conditions for growth. Yalom integrates these insights, showing that connection fosters awareness, facilitates emotional expression, and enables the integration of self. True connection requires authenticity, not mere proximity. One can be physically present but emotionally distant. Only when vulnerability is shared does isolation begin to dissolve. The act of connection, particularly authentic connection, is transformative because it validates existence. When one articulates fears, longings, or regrets, and another responds with empathy rather than judgment, the burden of isolation is alleviated. Yalom often described this as a meeting of minds and hearts, an acknowledgement that while existential isolation cannot be entirely erased, it can be mitigated through shared recognition. This recognition does not eliminate solitude, but it softens its edges, turning a potentially crushing awareness of aloneness into a space for growth and intimacy. Isolation intensifies suffering. Grief endured in silence can become unbearable. Anxiety unchecked by dialogue can metastasize into despair. Joy, when unshared, diminishes in intensity. Connection transforms these experiences by providing witness, validation, and emotional resonance. To be fully human is to seek such connection, to risk rejection and misunderstanding in order to encounter authenticity. Yalom repeatedly emphasizes that the courage to connect, to reach across the relational gap, is essential for psychological and existential health. Yet connection must be balanced with the acceptance of existential isolation. Yalom reminds us that no relationship can fully dissolve the inherent separateness of consciousness. Complete merger is impossible, and attempts to achieve it lead to disappointment or dependency. Awareness of this boundary paradoxically enhances connection. It allows us to cherish relational moments without illusion, to engage fully while respecting autonomy, and to cultivate bonds grounded in reality rather than fantasy. Solitude and connection thus become complementary. Solitude fosters self-awareness, while connection provides healing and perspective. In the end, connection over isolation is not merely therapeutic, it is existentially redemptive. To look into the eyes of another and be seen, understood, and accepted is to experience the affirmation of one's being. Yalom teaches that although we remain ultimately alone, the courage to connect transforms existence. Through authentic relationships, we alleviate suffering, enrich our experience of life, and take steps toward a full mind, a mind that is aware, engaged, and capable of embracing both solitude and intimacy. To achieve a full mind, one must not only confront the weight of unspoken emotions, the hunger for meaning, and the paradox of isolation, but also integrate all facets of the self into a coherent whole. IRVIN Yalom describes this as the process of inner integration, a psychological and existential reconciliation that allows the mind to function with clarity, authenticity, and vitality. Without this synthesis, the insights we gain from awareness, meaning, and connection remain fragmented, like scattered puzzle pieces that never form a complete picture. Inner integration is what allows the puzzle of the self to fit together, giving life a sense of continuity and purpose. Integration begins with awareness. Yalom emphasizes that confronting reality is the first step toward wholeness. To acknowledge mortality, freedom, and the inevitability of isolation is to take responsibility for one's existence. But awareness alone is not sufficient. As Jung observed, the psyche contains parts of ourselves we deny or suppress. The shadow, comprised of impulses, fears, and desires we refuse to recognize. Integration requires bringing these hidden aspects into consciousness without judgment. It is the delicate process of embracing the totality of the self, including the traits and emotions we have historically rejected. Only through this courageous acknowledgement can inner tension transform into inner harmony. The unspoken emotions that weigh us down must also be assimilated into the self. Yalom's clinical experiences repeatedly illustrate that patients who confront long-repressed grief, anger, or fear often experience profound relief and newfound energy. Integration is not about erasing these emotions or becoming perfect. It is about recognizing their role in our lives and learning to relate to them constructively. The individual who integrates anger, for example, no longer becomes unconsciously reactive, but can express it appropriately. The person who integrates grief does not live in despair, but carries memory and loss as part of a broader, more resilient self. Inner integration is the alchemy that transforms psychic weight into conscious strength. Meaning, too, is a central component of integration. Viktor Frankl's philosophy underscores that a life without purpose is incomplete, no matter how externally successful. Yalom builds on this, arguing that inner coherence emerges when our values, actions, and relationships align with the purpose we choose. Integration involves harmonizing conflicting desires and aspirations, aligning daily behavior with deeper goals, and resolving the tension between who we are and who we wish to become. Without this alignment, the mind remains fractured, torn between impulses and ideals. With it, even challenges and suffering acquire significance, contributing to the narrative of a life fully lived. Connection with others serves as both a mirror and a catalyst for integration. Yalom repeatedly demonstrates that authentic relational encounters provide the feedback necessary for self-understanding. Others reflect aspects of ourselves we may not see clearly, reveal contradictions, and challenge habitual defenses. Through these interactions, we negotiate the balance between independence and interdependence, solitude and intimacy. Integration requires recognizing that we are relational beings. The self is not formed in isolation, but in dialogue with the world. Relationships are the crucible in which awareness, emotion, and meaning converge. Integration is also a dynamic, ongoing process rather than a static achievement. Human existence is fluid. New experiences, relationships, and challenges constantly arise. Inner integration does not demand perfection, but requires continual reflection, adaptation, and commitment to growth. Yalom emphasizes that psychotherapy itself is a microcosm of this lifelong process. Within the therapeutic space, patients encounter aspects of themselves they have hidden, confront existential concerns, and practice authenticity. The skills developed in therapy, self-awareness, emotional honesty, and deliberate choice, extend into everyday life, guiding the individual towards sustained integration. Finally, inner integration encompasses acceptance of mortality, of limitations, of vulnerability, and of the inherent uncertainties of life. Yalom insists that acceptance is not resignation, but a conscious engagement with reality. To integrate the self fully is to acknowledge life's impermanence and unpredictability while actively participating in its unfolding. This acceptance reduces internal conflict, diminishes anxiety, and fosters resilience. It allows the mind to embrace the full spectrum of human experience, from joy to sorrow, certainty to doubt, connection to solitude. In essence, the path to inner integration is the culmination of the journey toward a full mind. Awareness, expression of emotion, pursuit of meaning, and connection with others converge in this integrative process. The fragmented self coalesces into a coherent whole, capable of navigating life with authenticity and depth. As Yalom writes, Life's meaning emerges not by avoiding reality, but by embracing it fully. Inner integration does not erase life's challenges. It equips the mind to engage with them consciously, creatively, and resiliently. It is the final act of assembling the scattered puzzle pieces, transforming existence into a life that is not only survived, but truly lived. If this journey through the mind resonated with you, don't let the insights end here. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you never miss a deep dive into psychology, meaning, and self-discovery. Share your thoughts in the comments. What piece of your inner puzzle are you exploring today? Join our community, continue the conversation, and return often to challenge your mind, expand your awareness, and embrace the path to a fuller, more meaningful life. Your next step toward understanding yourself starts here. Click, watch, and grow.